The bet was 20 credits. Nora heard it clearly. Two Velthury crewmen stood near the cargo bay entrance, speaking in low voices while she rolled past them with her duffel bag balanced across her lap. They were tall, gray-scaled, and confident in a way that people are when they have never been proven wrong. One of them said 14 days. The other said 7. They were betting on how long before she got sent back. Nora did not slow down. She made a mental note of their faces and kept moving. The GCS Revenant was a mid-range coalition support vessel. Not glamorous. The corridors were narrow, the lighting was yellow-green, and the floor plating rattled slightly under the wheels of her chair. She had already counted 3 doorway thresholds that would need a running start to clear. The ship had been built for species that walked on 2 legs and had use of all of them. Nobody had thought about the rest. She found her quarters on the lower deck. The door had a step, not a large step, about 4 inches of raised metal. But 4 inches is all it takes to stop a standard wheelchair cold. Nora looked at it for a moment, then pulled a flat wedge ram from the side pouch of her chair, locked it into place against the step, and rolled inside. The room was small. The bunk was fixed to the wall at standard height, which was too high. The desk was bolted at a level meant for someone standing. The emergency locker was mounted at chest height for a Velthury, which put above her head. Nora set her bag down, looked around the room, and got to work. She had a collapsible step platform for the bunk, a lightweight desktop riser that folded out and locked at seated height, and a reaching tool that could hook and pull the locker latch. She had packed all of it because she had known. She always knew. The galaxy was not built for her, and she had stopped waiting for it to change, by the time the ship's lights dimmed for first sleep cycle. Her quarters were functional. The mission briefing was the next morning. Nora arrived early and placed herself at the end of the table where the sight lines were best. The other crew members filed in one by one. Most of them glanced at her chair and then looked away quickly, the way people do when they're deciding whether to say something and choosing not to. Security Chief Drac came in last. He was the largest Velthury on the ship, with a ridge of darker scales running from his brow to the back of his neck. He looked at Nora the way someone looks at an object left in the wrong room. The briefing officer pulled up the mission details. A coalition outpost in contested space had gone dark 3 weeks ago. It contained a data core with information valuable enough that Admiral Yaren had personally selected the recovery team. The plan was to dock, enter, retrieve, and extract. Clean. Simple. That was the word the briefing officer used. Clean and simple. Nora listened to all of it and said nothing. She memorized the outpost schematics as they appeared on the display. She noted the power grid layout, the emergency access corridors, the structural weak points in the outer ring. She filed all of it away. After the briefing, Drac stopped beside her in the corridor. "You are the technical consultant," he said. It was not a question. It came out the way a label does when someone is not sure the label fits. "That is correct," Nora said. "Admiral Yaren requested you personally." "Also correct." Drac looked at her chair, then back at her face. "This is a combat support vessel. We may encounter resistance. I am aware, and you believe you are prepared for that." Nora looked up at him. She had spent a long time learning how to hold eye contact with people who were much taller than her. It was a specific kind of patience learned early and practiced often. "I believe I am here," she said. "Same as you." Drac held the look for a moment longer. Then he walked away without answering. Sola found her near the observation port later that afternoon. Sola was Falani, shorter than the Velthury, with pale skin that shifted faintly in color depending on their mood. Right now, they were a soft, uncertain gray. "I am your assigned liaison," Sola said. "I was told to help you move around the ship." "I can move around the ship fine," Nora said. "I know," Sola said. "I watched you clear that cargo bay ramp earlier. It was impressive." Nora looked at them. There was no performance in it. No pity dressed up as a compliment. Just a plain statement from someone who had paid attention. "You can walk with me if you want," Nora said. "But I do not need to be steered." "Understood," Sola said, and fell into step beside her. They moved together through the lower corridor in comfortable quiet. Nora pointed out 2 more threshold problems and a conduit panel that had been installed crooked. Sola wrote them down without being asked. That night, Nora sat at her fixed desk and reviewed the outpost schematics one more time. She ran her thumb along the left armrest of her chair, where the arc welder nozzle was folded flat against the frame. She checked the charge on the taser array built into the footrest. Both were full. The galaxy assumed many things about her. It had been doing so for years. She had learned something important from all of it. Assumptions are a kind of blindness, and blind enemies are the easiest kind. She closed the schematics and went to sleep. Sola asked the question on the second day out, during a quiet stretch when the Revenant was cutting through empty space and there was nothing to do but wait. They were in the lower observation bay. Nora was running a diagnostic on her chair's drive motor. Sola was sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby, which put them roughly at eye level with her, which Nora noticed and appreciated without saying so. "How did it happen?" Sola asked. "If you're willing to say." Nora did not stop working. She pulled a small panel off the side of the chair and checked the wiring behind it. The question did not bother her. Pity bothered her. Curiosity did not. "Planetary surface operation," she said. 7 years ago, we were clearing a structure. The charge was set wrong. Not my work, but my team, my job to catch it. I did not catch it in time." She paused. "The blast came up through the floor. My team got out. I did not get out fast enough." Sola was quiet for a moment. Their skin had gone a muted amber, which Nora had learned meant they were thinking carefully about what to say next. "Your people kept you in service after that?" Sola asked. "My people tried very hard to retire me," Nora said. "They said I was done. Medical board. 3 separate review panels. A general who told me, very kindly, that I had served well and should rest." "What did you do?" Nora clicked the panel back into place. "I built this chair. Then I went back to work." She set the diagnostic tool down and looked at Sola. "It took 2 years. A lot of arguments. A lot of doors that were not built for wheels. But I had already decided, so the deciding was done. What was left was just work." Sola tilted their head. "In my culture," they said slowly, "there's a word for a person who has been broken open and then sealed themselves back together with something stronger than what was there before. I do not know the human translation. We just say stubborn," Nora said. Sola smiled. It was a small smile, but a real one. Nora went back to work on the chair. She walked Sola through the modifications while she checked them. Not because Sola needed the information, but because explaining it helped her think. The frame was built from salvaged combat drone plating. It was 3 times heavier than a standard chair and looked it, but the weight was distributed correctly and the motor was strong enough to handle it. The left armrest housed the arc welder, folded flat during normal use, able to extend and fire within 4 seconds. The footrest contained a taser array running on a dedicated battery pack, capable of delivering a charge that would stop most humanoid species cold for roughly 2 minutes. The wheels were reinforced and self-sealing. The drive system had a manual override that bypassed the main computer and ran on direct input. She had also, in a concession of practicality, installed a small compartment under the seat that held a first aid kit, a compact cutting tool, and 2 days of emergency rations. "You built all of this yourself," Sola said. "Most of it. I had help with the welder housing. And the ship's crew does not know what it can do." "The ship's crew did not ask," Nora said simply. There was a sound in the corridor outside. Drax's voice, then footsteps. He appeared in the doorway and looked at both of them with the flat expression he used for most things. "The landing team list is set," he said. "You are not on it." Nora looked up. "All right." Drax waited, as if expecting an argument. When none came, something shifted briefly in his expression. Not quite confusion, something adjacent to it. "You will remain on the ship during the retrieval," he continued. "You can monitor from the bridge." "I understand," Nora said. He looked at her chair again. Then at Sola. Then he left. Sola watched him go. "He expected you to push back." "I know. Why did you not?" Nora thought about how to answer that. Outside the observation bay viewport, the stars moved slowly past in long white streaks as the ship held its FTL path. The outpost was still hours away. "Because when things go wrong," she said at last, "I want to be the one they call, not the one they had to argue with first." She paused. "Let them go in thinking they do not need me. It is a better position." Sola looked at her for a long moment. "You already know something will go wrong." Nora did not confirm it. She picked up her diagnostic tool again and started on the next panel. "But yes." She knew. She had read the initial intelligence report 3 times. She had cross-referenced the outpost schematics with the reported power failure pattern. The failure had not spread the way a system's fault spreads. It had been precise, targeted. Something had cut the outpost communications from the inside out in a specific order, which meant something had known exactly what to cut and when. That was not a mechanical failure. That was a plan, and plans left by someone else were the kind of problem that a landing team walking in without that knowledge was not going to see coming until it was already too late. Nora finished her diagnostic, folded the tool away, and sat quietly in the dark blue light of the viewport for a long time. The ship hummed around her. Somewhere above, the crew moved through their routines, confident and unbothered. She did not try to warn them again. She had already tried once. Nobody had listened to she waited. And she made sure the chair was ready. The outpost looked fine from the outside. That was the problem, no hull damage. No debris field. Running lights still blinking in their slow, steady pattern. Everything exactly as it should be, which meant whoever had taken it had been careful. Careful meant prepared. Prepared meant they were still inside. Waiting. Nora was on the bridge when the landing team docked. She had pulled up the sensor relay on a side console and was watching the outpost's internal readings while the main crew ran their pre-clearance checks. Nobody asked what she was doing. She had stopped expecting them to. Drac led the team in. 6 Velthary soldiers, full armor, rifles up. They moved fast through the entry corridor. The sensor feed showed their positions as small yellow dots. The outpost interior showed nothing else. For 4 minutes, nothing happened. Then the lights went out. Not a power fault. Not a flicker. All at once, every light in the outpost cut to black, and the sensor feed switched to thermal imaging. In the same second, the yellow dots on Nora's screen began to scatter. She heard it through the comms before she saw it. Weapons fire. A sharp sound, then shouting in Velthary, then a sound she recognized as a body hitting the floor hard. Contact. Drac's voice. Multiple hostiles. Northeast corridor. Reth is down. Then, pull back. More weapons fire. Then silence from one of the comm channels. Nora was already working. She pulled the outpost schematics up alongside the thermal feed and started reading the hostile positions. The attackers were moving in a coordinated pattern. 2 groups pushing from opposite directions, driving the landing team toward the central hub, which had no secondary exits. It was a compression tactic. Clean. Rehearsed. They had planned this specific response for a specific team size. Drac, she said into the comms. This is Nora. Not now. You are being pushed into the central hub. It is a trap. Do not go forward. Break left through Maintenance Corridor 7C. It runs parallel to the Northeast Passage and exits behind your contact point. A burst of fire. A Velthary curse. Vance, we do not have time. You have less time if you keep going forward. Corridor 7C. Now. Silence. Then she heard a moving. Footsteps, fast, changing direction, that on the sensor feed, 3 yellow dots broke left. The hostile group that had been pushing from the front slowed. They had not expected the target to know about the maintenance corridor. They adjusted, but the adjustment took 12 seconds, and 12 seconds was enough for Drac's team to clear the choke point and get behind cover point. 2 yellow dots were still stationary. Down. Reth and Paver are not moving, Solus said quietly, appearing at Nora's shoulder. I see them, Nora said. She kept her voice flat and her hands steady. Grief was for later. The living needed her attention now. She tracked the hostile heat signatures on the thermal feed. There were 9 of them. Greth. She recognized the armor profile now, the compact rectangular shape of their shoulder plates. They were regrouping in the northeast corridor, preparing a second push. Nora found the outpost's emergency power grid in the system. It was still accessible remotely. The Greth had cut the main lighting to blind the landing team, but they had not locked the emergency grid out. Either they did not know she was watching from the ship, or they had not considered it worth the effort. That was a mistake. She accessed the emergency grid and navigated to the section controls. The northeast corridor had its own power relay. She isolated it, ran the charge up to 140%, and triggered it in a single burst out on the thermal feed. Every Greth heat signature in the northeast corridor jerked and stumbled at once. The overloaded relay had sent a surge through the floor plating, disrupting their suit electronics and briefly frying their targeting systems. Not a kill, but enough. Drac, you have a window. Move to the data core room. Northeast corridor is temporarily disrupted. You have maybe 90 seconds before they reset. She heard him running, heard the rest of his team following. Core room reached, he said. We have it. Good. Now hold there. She was already pulling up the extraction corridor map. The route back to the dock was blocked. The Greth had repositioned 2 units at the main junction while she had their northeast team off balance. The window for a clean exit was closed. There was a secondary docking bay on the outpost south ring. Structural risk, according to the schematics, a microfracture in the outer seal that had been flagged but not repaired before the outpost went dark. Not safe for a standard dock. But her shuttle pod was smaller than the team's vessel, and she had docked in worse conditions. Pog, sit tight. I'm coming to you. You are on the ship. Not for long. She closed the comms before he could answer and turned to Sola. Can you manage to sense her relay from here while I'm gone? Sola's skin had gone a very pale white, but their voice was steady. Yes. Watch the Greth positions. Tell me if they start moving toward the core room. Nora was already rolling toward the corridor. And tell no one what I'm doing until I'm already docked. They will want to stop you, Sola said. Yes, Nora said. That is why the timing matters. She did not look back. She had already said everything that needed saying. What came next was not words. The docking bay was 3 levels down. She took the maintenance lift because it was faster and because she had already mapped the fastest route to the secondary shuttle pod 2 days ago when she first came aboard. She had always known. The secondary bay seal was bad. Nora could see the fracture line from inside the shuttle pod as she came in, a gray split running along the outer ring of the docking collar, maybe 2 centimeters wide. The bay zone systems had flagged it and locked the autodock function out. She bypassed the autodock and brought the pod in on manual. IT took 4 attempts. The 3rd attempt scraped the pod's port side against the collar and sent a sound through the hull like a scream. On the 4th, the magnetic locks caught. The seal was not perfect. A thin hiss of pressure was escaping somewhere behind her. She had maybe 20 minutes before the bay became a problem. She pulled up her comms as she rolled down the pod ramp into the outpost south corridor. Sola, I am in. Greth units are still holding position, Sola said. The comm crackled with static from the damaged outpost systems. 2 near the main junction, 1 moving toward the east storage room. The group you disrupted in the northeast has partially reset. You have maybe 6 minutes before they are back at full capacity. Understood. The south corridor was darker than the schematics had suggested. Emergency strip lighting ran along the floor. Dim orange lines, barely enough to see by. The corridor was built for standard-sized bipeds, which meant the ceiling clearance was fine, but the floor was uneven maintenance plating. Not smooth. Not ideal for wheels. Nora moved fast anyway. She had memorized the route to the core room, south corridor to the access junction, left through the service passage, 2 sets of blast doors, and then a straight run to the core room entrance. Approximately 90 meters total. She cleared the first 60 meters without contact. Then she came around the bend at the service passage entrance and found 2 Greth soldiers waiting in the junction. They were not looking her way. They were facing the main corridor, weapons up, covering the route they expected a threat to come from. When the sound of her wheels reached them, they both turned at the same time. The larger one looked at her chair, then at her face, then back at the chair. It tilted its head, a slow, almost lazy movement, and said something in Greth to its companion. The companion responded. Then the first one made a sound that was unmistakably a laugh. Nora had seen this moment before. Different faces, different worlds, same expression. The same conclusion drawn in the same half-second. Not a threat. She let them finish. Then she fired the taser array. The charge hit both of them at the same time. The Greth were heavily built, and their armor was rated for standard energy weapons. But the taser array ran on a different frequency, designed to bypass suit electronics and hit the nervous system directly. Both soldiers dropped. Not gracefully. They went down hard and did not move. Nora rolled past them without slowing. She reached the first blast door and found it sealed. The manual override panel was on the right side at standing height. She pulled her reaching tool out of the under-seat compartment, hooked the release lever, and pulled. The door ground open on emergency power. She went through. The second blast door was partially jammed. Something had hit the frame during the initial Greth breach and bent the lower track. It was open about 40 centimeters. Not enough for the chair. Nora looked at it for 2 seconds. Then she activated the arc welder. The nozzle extended from the armrest with a soft mechanical click. She ran the cutting edge along the bent track, working fast, peeling back the deformed metal in 3 short passes. The door juddered and slid another 30 centimeters. Enough. She was through in under a minute. Drax's voice came through the comms. Vance, we can hear cutting. Where are you? Service passage. 30 seconds. She came around the final corner and found Drax and 2 surviving Velthary soldiers crouched behind an overturned equipment rack outside the core room door. Drax was holding a field compress against a wound on his left forearm. His armor was burned along the shoulder. He looked at her. Then he looked behind her at the path she had just come from. You came from the south corridor, he said. Yes. That route was not on the extraction plan. The extraction plan did not work, she said. She was already looking at the core room door, which was sealed with a coded lock that the Greth had engaged when they pulled back. How long since they were in here? 8 minutes. She accessed the lock panel. Coalition standard encryption, older model. She had it open in 90 seconds. Move, she said. They moved. The core room was small and smelled of overheated electronics. The data core was still in its housing. The Greth had been planning to extract it intact, which meant they had not had time to remove it yet. Nora took it out of the housing herself, locked it into the storage compartment on the underside of her chair's frame, and sealed it. South corridor, she said. Shuttle pod docked at secondary bay. The seal is compromised. We need to move in the next 12 minutes. Drax stared at her for a moment that stretched a little too long. Move, she said again, and she was already rolling. He moved. Behind them, she heard the Greth resetting in the northeast corridor. She heard them find their 2 downed soldiers in the service passage. She heard shouting in Greth, the particular pitch that means the plan has just changed and nobody is happy about it. She did not slow down. They made it back to the Revenant with 4 minutes to spare before the secondary bay seal gave out entirely. Nora heard the bay depressurize behind them as the Revenant's docking clamps engaged. A deep groan of metal, a hiss that turned into a rush, and then nothing, just the solid hum of the ship around her. She sat in the docking corridor for a moment with her hands on her wheels and let herself breathe. 3 of Drax's team had made it back. 2 had not. The surviving Velthary soldiers were taken to the med bay. Drax stayed in the docking corridor long enough to pass the data core to the ship's intelligence officer, who took it and left without speaking. Then Drax stood with his back against the wall and looked at Nora. She was already checking her chair for damage from the blast door cutting. The welder housing had a scorch mark on the outer casing. The taser array needed a recharge. One of her wheels had picked up a deep scratch from the uneven plating. All of it was fixable. You knew, Drax said. Nora did not ask what he meant. I suspected. I told the briefing officer 2 days ago that the failure pattern looked like an intentional breach. He said I was being overcautious. Drax was quiet for a moment. Then, Reth had a family. A partner. 2 young ones. Nora set down the diagnostic tool. I know. I am sorry. If we had listened to you, you may have gone in better prepared, she said. But the Greth were already inside. The ambush was already set. You might have lost fewer. You might have lost the same number. I do not know. She paused. What I know is that the people who made it out did so because your team did their jobs and kept fighting. That matters. Drax looked at her for a long time. The ridge of scales along his brow was flat, relaxed for a Velthary. His voice, when he spoke, had lost the particular edge it had carried since she first came aboard. I put you on the bench, he said. Before we even reached the outpost, I had already decided you were not useful. You made a standard assessment based on available information, Nora said. It was not just that. She held his look. No, she said. It was not just that. But you got back on the comms when your plan failed. That is the part that counts. He did not answer, but the way he held himself changed. Not a bow, not a formal acknowledgement, but a shift in weight that meant something in Velthry body language. She had read enough about the species to recognize it. He was placing her in a different category now. Not cargo, not a passenger. Something else. She picked up the diagnostic tool and went back to work. Sola found her in her quarters an hour later. Nora had the chair partially disassembled on the floor, checking every joint and seal after the hard use of the day. The data core was secured in the ship's vault. The mission was technically complete. Sola sat down on the floor without being asked. Their skin was a warm, steady gold, a color Nora had started to associate with calm. "The crew is talking," Sola said, "about what you did in the outpost." "I imagined so." "The two soldiers who were betting on how long before you left," Sola said. "One of them repaired the broken ramp in your corridor." He did not say anything about it. Nora kept working. She did not look up. "I noticed. Does it matter to you? What they think now?" Nora thought about the question honestly. It would have been easy to say no, to present herself as someone untouched by it. "A little," she said, "not because I needed the approval, but because it is easier to do the work when the people around you are not working against you at the same time." She loosened a bolt on the wheel housing and set it aside. "It is not about them deciding I am worth something. It is about them getting out of the way so I can do what I came to do." Sola nodded slowly. "And what did you come to do?" "The real answer." Nora paused. "Admiral Yaren sent me because he knew what was on that data core. He needed someone who could read the power failure pattern, access the outpost remotely, and get the core out even if everything went wrong. He has worked with me before. He knows what I can do." "He trusted you," Sola said. "He saw the work," Nora said. "The work is what matters." She reassembled the wheel housing and spun the wheel once to check the rotation. "Smooth. Good. Will you stay on the Revenant?" Sola asked. "No. This was one mission. I have another assignment after this." She looked at Sola. "What?" Sola's skin shifted through a quick cycle of colors. Pale, then amber, then settling back to gold. "I would like to request a transfer to wherever you're going next." Nora looked at them for a moment. She was not used to people asking to follow her. She was used to people stepping aside or stepping in the way. "You will be working with me," she said. "Not for me." "I understand that," Sola said. Nora nodded once. "I will put the request in." Sola's skin brightened, just slightly. Outside the viewport, the stars were still. The Revenant held position while damage assessments were completed. Somewhere in the ship's vault, a data core waited. Somewhere in the med bay, 3 soldiers were being repaired, and 2 empty beds sat quietly in the dark. Nora put her chair back together. She did not waste a grief. The data core took 6 hours to decrypt. Nora was in the intelligence room when the first results came through. Not because she had been invited, but because the intelligence officer had learned by now that asking her to leave was more trouble than it was worth. He slid the initial report across the table without comment. She read it in 2 minutes. The Greth infiltration went deeper than anyone had guessed. Supply route data, fleet positioning, coalition resupply schedules for 4 separate sectors. The outpost had not just gone dark. It had been systematically mined for months before the final breach. Someone inside the coalition's logistics network had been feeding access codes to the Greth for over a year. This was what Admiral Yaren had suspected. This was why he had sent her specifically. Not because she was the best fighter, but because she was one of 3 people in the coalition who had both the clearance and the pattern reading skills to confirm what the core contained and know what to do with it next. She filed the initial findings and sent them directly to Yaren's personal channel. His response came 12 minutes later. "Good work, Nora. Expected nothing less. Stand by for next assignment coordinates." She read it twice. Then she closed the channel and went to find Drac. He was on the bridge, standing at the far console, reviewing the damage assessment from the outpost operation. He had a fresh bandage on his left forearm. He turned when he heard her approach. "The core data confirms a long-term infiltration," she said. "I have filed preliminary findings with the Admiral. His office will contact the Revenant's command chain within the hour." Drac nodded. He seemed to be working towards something. She waited. "I have submitted an after-action report," he said finally. I listed you as tactical asset, essential to mission success. It is the highest field designation available to me. Thank you, Nora said. I also submitted a formal request to upgrade your classification from consultant to embedded crew specialist. He paused. The decision is not mine to make, but the request is in. Nora looked at him steadily. You did not have to do that. No, he said. I did not. They looked at each other for a moment in the way that soldiers do when the fight is over and the inventory has been taken, and what remains is just the truth of what happened. I was wrong about you, Drax said. It came out flat and direct, the way Velthury said hard things, without decoration, because they believed decoration made honesty smaller. You updated your assessment when the evidence changed, Nora said. That is the correct thing to do. He did not argue with that. Neither of them needed to say anything more. She left him on the bridge and went to find Sola, who was in the observation bay again, watching the stars. The Revenant had begun its return course. The stars were moving again in long, slow lines, and the light was the blue-white of deep FTL. They sat together in the quiet for a while. Sola's skin was a pale silver, content, if Nora was reading the color right. The transfer request has been filed, Nora said. Yerin's office will process it. Should be approved before we dock. Sola's skin shifted to a warmer tone. Where are we going? Frontier Station. There's a second compromised outpost, further out than this one. Same failure signature. Same pattern. She paused. The Greth will have had time to prepare. And you want to be there. I need to be there, Nora said. Someone with the right clearance and the right eyes has to go in first and read what the station is telling us before the retrieval team does. Otherwise, it goes the same way it went here. Sola considered this. Will Drac come? No. Different ship, different assignment. This one will be a new crew. She turned to look at Sola. Which means we do this from the beginning again. New people who have not seen the work yet. New assumptions to outlast. Does that bother you? Sola asked. Nora thought about the two Velthury soldiers in the cargo bay. The bet. 20 credits. 7 days or 14. She thought about the step at her door and the inaccessible desk and the look on Drax's face when he first looked at her chair. She thought about the Greth soldiers in the service passage, laughing. No, she said. It does not bother me. I have had a lot of practice. Sola made a quiet sound that was very close to a laugh. Outside, the stars kept moving. The Revenant held its course through the dark, carrying its data core and its dead and its living back toward the rest of the galaxy. In a medical bay on the other side of the contested zone, 2 Greth soldiers were still in recovery. Their nervous systems would take weeks to fully reset. They had a great deal of time to think. They had laughed at a human in a chair. They had made the same calculation that most of the galaxy made, the same quick arithmetic that added up a body in a seat and arrived at the number 0. They had been wrong. The way the galaxy was often wrong about humans. Humans had a habit of building strength into the places where they had been broken, of carrying their damage forward and turning it into something that cut. The galaxy kept forgetting this. It kept being surprised. Nora finished her drink, set the cup aside, and opened the next mission file. The work was waiting.